Welcome to the Society of Financial Service Professionals May video teleconference titled Helping Clients Successfully Integrate Charitable Giving into Succession Planning. I'm Rob Wellendorf, your moderator for today's program. Thank you to the American Cancer Society for sponsoring today's VTC, and welcome to any members of their National Professional Advisor Network, NPAN. Studies show that over 70% of charitable giving is done by individuals during their lifetime. Including transfers at death raises that number to 80%. Now consider that business owners give at higher levels in comparison to their counterparts, with 31% of high net worth clients reporting that they would switch advisors if the new advisor would discuss philanthropy. The implications for advisors are clear. Advisors who can offer knowledgeable guidance will distinguish themselves from the others and add tremendous value to advisor-client relationships. With us today, we have two experts. Randy Fox is a third-generation entrepreneur and a founder of Two Hawks Consulting, LLC. Two Hawks helps estate planners, financial advisors, and CPAs solve complex tax and wealth transfer issues faced by their high net worth clients. Randy also co-founded Easy Charitable, LLC, an online training resource for professional advisors interested in expanding their capabilities in philanthropic giving. A national thought leader in the planned giving space, Randy is currently the editor-in-chief of Planned Giving Design Center, a national newsletter and website for philanthropic advisors. In 2015, Randy was awarded the Fithian Leadership Award by the International Association of Advisors in Philanthropy. During Randy's tenure at Unknown Vision, LLC, more than 300 families were served and more than $500 million was directed to philanthropic purposes. Laura Malone, CAP-CEPA, is Vice President of Corporate Complex Giving at American Endowment Foundation, AEF, where she has consulted with hundreds of trusted advisors, families, and business owners about donor-advised funds and other charitable giving strategies. Laura has been published in various local and national publications and has spoken both locally and nationally to financial, tax, and estate planning organizations. Laura serves as a faculty member for the Exit Planning Institute's Certified Exit Planning Advisor, the CEPA designation. She serves as board president of the International Association of Advisors in Philanthropy. Okay, so panel, let's get started. I should mention, as this particular topic was announced, I immediately referenced back to a meeting that I had very recently in my conference room with a business owner. Gentleman in his early 60s, owns and operates a manufacturing firm. As I learned more about his situation as it relates to succession and exit planning, he immediately shared with me some concerns that he has, actually frustrations, about the lack of labor and trades coming into the manufacturing industry. And I responded to him with a question. If you could make some impact as it relates to bringing labor into the trades, whether it's scholarship for tuition, whether it's providing funding for equipment or programs at the local community college, I had asked, is that something that he might be interested in? His response was, yes, I hadn't thought about that. And as I've learned, being a society member for over 25 years, I immediately need to refer to an expert. So with that, I'm going to ask Laura to share some of her experience being in the space for many years.
Thank you so much, Rob. As part of American Endowment Foundation, I've had the privilege of consulting numerous financial service professionals, financial advisors, attorneys, CPAs, and donors in the transition of their wealth from personal capital to charitable capital through the use of donor-advised funds. Primarily and most recently, my role has dovetailed almost exclusively to the role of complex giving strategies within the scope of business owners, whether it be transitioning their business, transitioning the real estate behind the business, gifting insurance policies that were related to the business, or other complex giving strategies that come in with this exit planning strategy. It's been a privilege of mine to do this for nearly 10 years now with AEF, but has been, something that has been a fire hose of learning early on, and just something that I've become well practiced in, especially with the guidance of mentors like my partner here, Randy Fox.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been doing this in one form or another for close to 30 years, and the industry's changed significantly. And what we're seeing now is kind of a confluence of events. We have the largest wealth transfer in history going on. Paul Schervish's study from a few years back, trillions and trillions of dollars, and much of that wealth is coming from business owners. And yet, as advisors, I think they're not really getting good advice because they spend years and years and years doing everything they can to save income taxes in their business, because no business owner likes paying income tax. And then when they sell their business, they just give all the money back because they don't do any significant planning. And I think our business has changed significantly to becoming much more income tax centric, and certainly charitable planning has much to do with income tax planning as well as the good it does for society.
And I think definitely with the tax law changes, it's added a new environment to create additional leverage. Definitely there's numerous changes that can come into the strategy with charitable gifting. You have the income tax deductions, as Randy talked about. In particular with business owners, the business tends to be their most highly appreciated asset, tends to be in a lot of cases maybe their only asset, or that asset and some real estate tied to it. There's not a lot of investable, marketable securities or cash lying around. So the avoidance of capital gains really becomes pivotal in that standpoint. Also, and this is probably more often looked as a given, but maybe not always looked as the only strategy, is the idea of the estate and gift tax. The idea of what planning can be done now to avoid some of those estate and gift taxes down the road. Oftentimes, depending on the charitable strategy, there can be vehicles created that can help generate tax-free growth of that charitable capital. And as always, the idea that avoiding alternative minimum tax comes into play and can really have an impact for a lot of the business owners, because most of them are in that space.
Yeah, again, tax planning is so critical, and I liken it to as someone exits the business, it's like you're going to go to the doctor with your business. And if the doctor only examines the left side of your body, he's really not doing his job. So if he's only using traditional strategies and doesn't bring in the charitable planning strategies, you're not going to get the best diagnosis and the best treatment. And so I think it's just incumbent on every advisor to at least have a working knowledge of some of the things that can be deployed that will help the business owner get where he wants to go.
And I think in a lot of cases, too, the idea that with the changes in the tax laws, really engaging those professionals in the process, that collaboration really becomes key, especially with certain nuances, with the increase of the adjusted gross income threshold of 60% of AGI for cash. There's still a little bit of uncertainty in how that plays out and whether or not that AGI threshold may be offset if it's included with any non-cash giving, like business interests, where it may ultimately drop that back down. So it's really important for the financial advisors to really be aligned with the client's tax professional in these discussions to make sure that they're making some of the best suggestions they can for these types of strategies, regardless of what type of charitable planning is being done. I'm sure Randy could agree, I've seen some wizardry that can really happen when you put the financial professional along with the CPA professional to brainstorm some of the best ways to create the benefit of giving along with the benefit of avoiding taxes.
Yeah, no question. And another one of the tax changes that's really important is the inability to essentially itemize deductions for most taxpayers. And for those of us that live in states that have state income tax or relatively high state income tax, the capital gains tax and the state income tax can make the tax on exit, 35 or 40% in some states like California. And when you look at that, giving 40 cents on the dollar to some government entity is not going to be the choice of most business owners getting out of their business. So we can help. We just have to be, advised and got in before it's too late.
Right. And I think it's important to understand that along with these tax changes, the charitable giving isn't always motivated purely by taxes. I think in a lot of cases we see that a lot of these business owners, especially if they're in smaller to middle market companies, are doing things giving anyway. You know, as a business owner, smaller businesses tend to give out of their corporate pocket or out of their personal pocket. It's part of the mantra of the business being a supporter of the community. So really taking a look at how many employers actually do give either of their personal capital or of their business capital to charitable causes in their area. You know, studies show that that can be as high as 90%. A lot of them may go and give at a percentage of profits that is greater than their larger corporate counterparts from a pro rata standpoint. And a lot of them aren't necessarily waiting for success to give back. I think the big crevasse that we see is that most financial advisors are waiting for a light to pop up saying, okay, they're successful now, let's go ahead and talk about giving. But for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially some of the younger entrepreneurs, they really want that baked into the cake. They really want to know how they can do both, how they can run their business and give back to their community. You see that a lot with some of the new companies being created, with Patagonia or with Tom's Shoes or any of the other ones that are out there where they're blending that business mission with their charitable mission. And I think the pivotal part where they're having frustration is really understanding where to go for that guidance and how to get that guidance. And most of them are giving charitably out of their own pockets. They're giving, to 5 or more charities. They want to know the best way that they can create a pie that's large enough for them to support all of their charities, which is why they're seeking the help from the financial service professionals rather than their independent nonprofits for this advice, because they want to help everybody that they serve. And business owners tend to be donating at the highest level for a lot of that.
I think if the U.S. Trust study that we often refer to, because it's one of the most expansive, shows business owners give at 5 times the rate of the average citizen. That's a magnitude that we really have to wrap our heads around. 5 times as much is a lot. And so it's not that they're not giving, but they feel a little lost in their giving. A lot of them give time. A lot of them serve on boards, but they're still not efficient and effective. You know, you made a reference to a quote at our opening. About 31% said that they would switch advisors if their advisors would talk to them about philanthropy. Interestingly, what they don't want necessarily is to hear all the strategies, tactics, and tools. What they really want is for someone to say, where do you want to give? What are the things you care about? Talk to me about your dreams and goals. And for those of us in this business, that should be the easiest thing we do. That helps secure and cement the relationship stronger than almost anything.
So what I hear, you use the word philanthropy and you use the word charitable. We know exactly what that means. However, our clients may be confused when they hear philanthropy, thinking Rockefeller type money. So how we position that discussion and the type of words or wording that we use, I think can be a starter for these discussions rather than isolating a business owner when he thinks or she thinks, I'm not in that space or that level.
Yeah, one of the references I make all the time is, you'll talk to a business owner about philanthropy and say, I'm not philanthropic, that's for wealthy people. But if you talk further, you find out that they've been funding the Little League team for 25 years.
Yeah.
And they don't think about that as philanthropy. They think about that as, well, this is my community, this is where I live, this is where my employees come from, this is where I want to give back. So we have to make that connection for them. We have to reframe the conversation so that they understand we're talking about the same thing. Yeah.
And if they're serving on boards in their local community, if they're serving on boards of local nonprofits, there's a huge correlation between how business owners or high net worth individuals in general spend their volunteer time and how much of that correlates with where their checkbook is giving money or where they're writing checks to. How much of that is tied into what's important to them from a community standpoint. How do they want to make a difference? Kind of like with your client, what's the problem that he wants to try and fix? How can he play a role in fixing that problem? It's not just the knee-jerk reactions of disaster relief, but a lot of times, entrepreneurs have a special skill set. They want to be able to tackle the problems. That's how they created their companies to begin with. So what problems can they do and tackle through their philanthropic giving? I think in a lot of cases, the idea that's lost with this, in particular with business owners, is the idea of really looking at their giving as something strategic, really looking at their giving as something intentional, and not just giving for giving's sake, but how can they go ahead and apply that giving in a way that can really fix some of the problems that they are frustrated with, or really improve some of the things that they already like but would like to see more improvement behind.
Yeah, and again, as we're talking about exit planning, one of the issues with exit planning that we see as we go along is business owners are reluctant to leave the business, not because they don't necessarily have a succession plan. They may have one for the business. Some of them do, not very many. But they have no succession plan for themselves. They don't know what they're going to retire to. And so they just stay at the business because that's what they know how to do. And I think if we can help them say, let's take all that knowledge and wisdom you had from building this company from nothing to where it is today and apply that to making the world a better place the way you want it to look. Take that out to the community and deploy that expertise and deploy some of the wealth you've created. Now let's talk about your future. And that's a major change.
To hear business owners say, oh, I don't have any hobbies, this is all I know, to give them an opportunity, as you just described, can energize or re-energize, give them purpose into that next phase of their life where they really didn't know what they would be doing.
And the excitement behind that. I mean, part of their initial excitement of creating their business was creating the business. Once it got up and running and got to be successful, all the minutia starts kicking in. Being able to take that wisdom and really apply that into the charitable construct is huge, from the idea of reinvigorating their passion, letting them feel like that 20-something-year-old again, or that 30-something-year-old again, with all the wisdom that they've accumulated in the 20, 30 years since they started the business. It's the best of both worlds, and they're still giving back in a meaningful way. They're still viewed as somebody of importance, just like they were as the business owner. But now it's in the construct of a community leader, as well as being that former business owner.
And as we're talking about the baby boomers, the baby boomers aren't like their parents' generation, right? The baby boomers are going to live a long time. They're young, they're vital, they're still active. It's why they're still working, because they still love what they do and they're healthy enough to do it. Well, if we can, again, if they've got another 20 years or another 25 years, why don't we turn that another 25 years into another productive period of time?
Right. Yeah, and it's going back to the passion that they had when they were teenagers. When they were, if you think about the baby boomer generation, and I know we spoke about this when we were talking earlier, I was amazed when my sister was in the Peace Corps, how many folks of the boomer generation were participating in activities like Peace Corps, because they wanted to get back a little bit of that person that they were back in that social movement time, that initial awakening of the different social movements going on in the late 60s and the early 70s. And I think they look towards, more and more studies are showing that they're looking towards their professional advisors for that, because they want to be able to have that unfettered access. They want to be able to have something that's unbiased, kind of like what I was saying before related to, more of the data is showing that they're steering away from the single issue charities for this guidance, because there is more than one charity that they may want to support. And while Charity A may do great work, Charity A isn't really going to step up and help Joe business owner craft a plan that's going to help Charity A, Charity B, and Charity C. So really so a lot of the data in particular, referencing once again to the U.S. Trust study, because they do great work over more than a decade now of surveying high net worth individuals in philanthropy, is that the growth of reliance upon accountants and attorneys and financial advisors in this space is huge. Over a series of 6 years that they did the survey, was growing for financial advisors by over 122%. So it really is a distinguishing point for financial advisors to really be able to hone in on this. And we're not expecting anybody from this presentation to become an expert, but we do feel there's value in folks being more knowledgeable in entering into that conversation. And like you were saying, Rob, realizing that there's other folks out there that can help them carry the ball the rest of the way in this process.
Yeah, and I always kind of jokingly say, if you want a marketing plan, become the charitable guy. Become the
Yeah.
person that really starts talking the talk and walking the walk. And you're going to get more high net worth clients than you're going to know what to do with, because they are looking for help. I mean, survey after survey says they are looking for help. And if we can be the ones to raise our hands and say, we don't have all the answers, but we know how to direct you. And by the way, there's another part of the study that says if you're a professional and a client asks you something about a charitable structure or question, anything, and you don't know the answer and you want to bring in another professional, you don't lose face. The clients are happy to have other experts help. They just want you to be the point of contact that directs them the right way. So you don't have to know everything. You don't have to be the be-all, end-all expert. You just have to be able to carry on the conversation and say, we can get you the answer.
And be open to that conversation. You know, as we talked about at the start of the program, 31% of high net worth individuals say they would switch advisors based upon this conversation. I've seen that in my discussion over the last decade with financial advisors through AEF, where we've had advisors that, as Randy mentioned, this is part of their marketing plan. And these are Class A clients in a lot of cases. You know, they may not always have, as business owners, they may tend to have a larger portfolio, but these are really good people. You know, years ago, I sat in on a CE session where I was talking about referrals and the idea of not really thinking about the value of the client from a dollar perspective, but what's your visceral reaction when you see their name on the caller ID? Are you like, oh, great, it's Bob? Or you're like, oh, God, it's Bob. You know, these are the people that when they call you, you're going to be saying, oh, great, it's Bob, because these are really great people to be working with. I'm sure you've seen that in your own practice.
Absolutely, yeah. It can be very energizing for the advisor as well as the business owner.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, one of the things we talked about yesterday or earlier was not only is this good for the clients, but as an advisor, there's something about doing this kind of work that just makes you feel better about what you're doing. You know that at the end of the day, you've done something to make the world a better place. You know, you didn't move money from here to there so it would be over here instead of over there. You did it because it's gone for some greater good. And that makes a world of difference, just from a personal standpoint.
And I think, you know, as the quote mentions in our slides, you know, advisors don't recommend what they don't understand. And I get that. And there's a lot to keep track of with advisors. But, you know, there's a lot of benefit in being more proactive in the conversation. A lot of studies indicate that donors are always the ones initiating the conversation, that advisors are seldom the ones initiating that. And in a lot of cases, I think Randy and I have both seen where it almost becomes the elephant in the room, because the client's waiting for the advisor to bring it up, but the advisor's not bringing it up. And that's how they move to the other advisor. It's not that the other advisor doesn't know. It's just they haven't brought it up. So being forthright, and I joke all the time about, you know, talking about philanthropy with your clients is kind of like voting in Chicago. You should be doing it early and often. And a lot of the studies show that the best results are not just bringing it up in the intake interview, but bringing it up recurrently. A lot, as Randy talks about, you know, a lot of the clients are expecting it in the initial interview, but it doesn't stop there.
Yeah, and again, it's, you know, advisors say they're bringing it up, but the clients aren't hearing it. So if you go back again to the surveys, there is a huge disconnect. The advisors are saying one thing and the clients are hearing something else, and most of the clients will say, no, we had to bring it up. A lot of the times the advisor waits. They want to know what their net worth is because they think, oh, giving is only for wealthy people. And Laura and I know an advisor down in downstate Illinois, and every single one of his clients, and he has a mid-market practice, every single one of his clients has a giving account of some sort or another. So it's not financial resources related. It's mindset related. And it's ours to overcome. It's not the clients to overcome. They're given anyway. Are they given efficiently, effectively, the way they want, where they want, when they want? Probably not. But we can help them with that. We just have to have the courage to speak up.
What I hear is asking about giving to charity, whether it's an intake interview or sometime later in discovery, should not be a yes or no question. Do you want to give to charity, yes or no? It needs to be more educational and a discussion, again, helping them understand that they're already involved more than likely. And I think that's the way we're built as people, as humans. I think we are built in a way to give.
Right. And I think a lot of that, like you said, is not just making it a yes or no question, but maybe finding out more about how they're supporting their community. You know, simplifying those questions. You know, are they on boards of different charities? Are they writing checks for the Little League? Are they, you know, are they participating in as a deacon or a lay person in their church? I mean, a lot of that is built into the fabric of giving, and for advisors to say their clients don't give is just a fallacy. I mean, 98%, according to IRS statistics from the SOI bulletins, 98% of high net worth individuals give. So for an advisor to say, you know, I find it very hard to believe that one advisor is working with all 2% of the people that don't. You know, I mean, so it's a huge, as we talked about, not just marketing, but it's value to the advisor.
Well, I think one of the things, if we're smart as advisors, one of the things that happens as we start to talk about giving is we discover the family's values, right? It tells us who they are as people, what's important to them, whether it's Little League or their church or synagogue or the arts or medical research. It tells us who they are. And what are we trying to find out anyway? Not what they have, but who they are.
Absolutely.
So this is the door. This opens the door to us really having deep and meaningful discussions. And when you have that kind of relationship with your client, they don't ever leave. I mean, they're gonna stay with you forever because you know who they are, you know what they want, you know what they're trying to do with their family, you know what they're trying to create, you know what they want their legacy to be, you know all those things, which no one else alive knows. It seems like it should be like falling off a log, but it doesn't ever happen that way.
And it's a great way to build that intergenerational. I mean, not just the matter of the wealth holder and the spouse or the husband and the wife. And there's already a ton of data out there about how many widows leave their financial advisors, but also too how many next gen leave the patriarch and matriarch's financial advisors. So it's a great way to create a stickiness among the entire family, because in most cases, these individuals want to include their family in these conversations. They want to do more from a family component, or they've been curious about how they can do more from a family component, how they can get more engaged with the kids or the grandkids. So being able to have this philanthropy as a strategy or this giving as a strategy is a great way to build a bridge to that next generation and help stem some of that loss that can happen whenever there's a death of the matriarch or the patriarch in that process. And a lot of the donors agree that this is a huge value in their conversations with their advisors, and the trust that's there, and that they see their advisor as someone that's more than just watching their money. You know, AEF's program years ago was based upon being advisor-centric, and a lot of that was because a lot of the donors were relying on the financial advisors to be that steward for the family after the patriarch was gone in a lot of cases. You know, that person had that much faith. So, you know, why go, you know, they're counted on in that respect. So to use this as an added leverage point is nothing but benefit in that case.
And again, another study, right? There's now a longitudinal study that says families that give together are happier, communicate better, get along better, have less stress, and less disruption in the family line. So when we said earlier that advisors want to talk, or clients want to talk to their advisors about philanthropy, again, it's not strategies, tactics, and tools, but as an advisor, what if you help the family put together a family giving plan? What if you sat down and say, listen, why don't we do this? We're going to allocate this much money from this account, and each child will be able to do this, and here, you know, we'll run the meeting for a couple of years, and then you can probably do it yourself. I mean, that's a game changer. And I know, you know, I know a handful of people who do that, and it's incredibly successful. Why don't other advisors do it? I have no idea.
Strong differentiator.
Strong differentiator.
Strong.
Yeah, go ask your financial advisor, is he doing this for you? I don't think so.
Well, and I think part of that is, you know, there is a huge false stigma about who philanthropy helps and hurts, or who giving helps and hurts in the process from the donor standpoint. There's a lot of donors and, quite frankly, a lot of financial advisors that will say, oh, my clients aren't giving to charity, or charity is their kids. They're not going to want to sacrifice their family for the sake of giving to XYZ cause. But the reality is that most of that giving being done isn't taking away from the kids. It's taking away from the government in a lot of cases. It can compound the wealth that the family has, and we'll talk about that more in some of the later case studies. But beyond compounding the wealth, it's a great tool for sharing those family values, sharing what means the most to the family. And it can be a great educational tool for the financial advisors as a training ground of teaching that next generation on how to make wise charitable decisions, how to work with the kids or the grandkids through the scope of that family giving bucket in what makes a good investment versus a bad investment, having the kids justify as they get older why they're choosing charity A versus charity B. All of those are lifelong lessons that go far beyond the scope of charitable giving and really help to create that bridge between wealth and purpose in society. And
I would suggest for many of our clients, for most, they would really feel rewarded when impact and legacy is around formation of the next generation, more so than financially. Mm-hmm. That seems to have significant impact.
Essentially, when you create the charitable bucket and include your children, you're giving them control over money, but it's not for them. They have to give it away someplace. And so you're teaching them money skills, but at very little risk to themselves, right? But they learn those skills. The other thing you're seeing is that they learn to differentiate their values from their parents' values. Now, they tend to all circle back eventually, but they get to have their own voice and be heard, maybe for the first time. And you're also, as a parent, especially if you're from a successful business owner family, you're showing them how to be grateful, right? How to be grateful to the world. And again, there's study after study. Gratitude is a very important component to happiness. Now, I haven't met a family yet that says, I'd really like to have an unhappy, dysfunctional family. I haven't met those parents. What everybody wants is they want their kids to continue to communicate, and they'd like a happy, functional family. This isn't the answer, but I think it's a component of the answer that, if it's brought in soon enough and early enough, it can really have a profound effect on families.
Right. And I can't think of a single patriarch, matriarch that doesn't want that. And some of the best stories come out of these activities that happen. I often talk about, and it still to this day is one of my favorite stories of a conference that I was at where it was, a grandfather and 3 of his grandkids talking about the giving that they're doing. And the grandfather is a wonderful man. I've known him for years, but he naturally has one of those gruff exteriors. I often joke that he's kind of like, the Ed Asner character in Mary Tyler Moore. Just always kind of has that roughness about him. And, the kids are talking about the lessons that they've learned, the experiences that they've had. They did a lot of stuff through their local community foundation. The grandkids ranged in age from 8 to 18, and towards the end of the session of everything that they were talking about, the grandson starts talking, the eldest grandson, the 18-year-old, starts talking about how, Grandpa's always been the cool grandparent. He's always been the one that all the grandkids want to spend time with. But there's so much that he's learned about his family and about his grandparents and about his parents through these activities and the stories that would come up. And he now has this archive of family stories that at some point when he gets older and gets married, he can share with his own kids that he would have never had but for these experiences. And here's this, grumbly exterior guy that's just a ball of mush, a puddle of tears in the front row that is just so overwhelmed with joy at hearing these reflections from his grandkids and knowing that he's made that much of an impact on their lives, that it wouldn't have happened let me take that back. It wouldn't have happened as easily as it probably did, but for this experience. And you can't take that away. That's a forever moment.
Contrast that with, my grandpa left me a trust with a bunch of money in it.
Yeah, that I'm going to buy a Ferrari with and crash it 3 days later.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the planning process, it is a process, and it is something that, takes time. And you do have to start somewhere. And oftentimes, that does start with asking those questions, maybe shifting the focus, like we were talking about, away from a scary word like philanthropy, and maybe talking about, what they have, what are their objectives, what are the things they've thought about. I've often heard that a great question is just the idea of, if you could do anything with any amount of money, what would it be? And oftentimes folks would say that they want to do something that is changing the world, or making a difference somewhere. Taking those objectives, looking at what they can afford to give. I mean, nobody is suggesting here that giving to charity should precede taking care of themselves or family. But in a lot of cases, there's a lot of ways that both can be done that aren't getting explored.
Yeah, and again, I think there's a lot of confusion. A lot of families will say, well, charity begins at home. Well, not really. Charity usually begins outside your home, right? But given the choice, and we pose this question to people all the time, you have three potential beneficiaries of your wealth. You have your family, you have the government, and you have charity. And I'd just like you to pick two. And that's often when the light goes on. You may not have a choice. Well, yeah, taxes are generally optional.
Yeah.
We can opt you out of the tax system, you just haven't done that yet. And that's a way to get attention. I mean, there's some truth to that, but a lot of truth to it. But if we do this right, we can reduce taxes dramatically and not take any money out of the family's pocket. Now, are you interested? Well, that again, it changes the way people perceive things, and it's our job to help them see things the way they haven't seen them before. If they'd seen them that way before, they would be doing them already. So, one of my favorite questions when I ever get in front of an audience is I ask for a show of hands of how many people in the room can name their maternal great-grandmother. And normally it's 10 to 20%. Typically, I never met my maternal grandmother. I have no idea what her name was. I don't know anything about her. But if I ask them, do they know Carnegie? Do they know Rockefeller? Do they know Getty? They all say yes. Well, why is that? Well, it's because their name's on stuff. Right? Now, their family doesn't have to be as big as the Rockefellers, the Gettys, or the Carnegies, but it doesn't mean that they can't do something locally that will have meaning for generations of the family to come. Even if it's only the family that knows, that's what they care about the most anyway. So, again, it's our job to change the way they're viewing how things can be done.
And a lot of the first step is with that is really looking at how they're funding their philanthropy. 90% of the giving in America is predominantly done in cash. And for any of us that have any kind of tax background, or even, funnel a little bit in playing with the tax backgrounds, we all know cash is the worst thing they can give. There's so many other ways that you can give with marketable securities and illiquid assets, where the business holders have a lot of wealth in their illiquid assets that have all this capital gains that hasn't been harvested or is going to be harvested through some kind of process that can really, we've seen it spun in one of two ways. It's either the idea of how that gift with that appreciated asset can cost the donor less because they're paying less in taxes and therefore that savings is coming out of their pocketbook, or how they can give more. My personal CPA always tells the story of his little old lady client that for years he couldn't get her to itemize because she just didn't see the value in it. She didn't want to put the work into it. And finally one year he said to her, he's like, listen, do you realize if you itemize, you can give away more next year? And she looked at him and said, well, honey, why aren't we itemizing? But for her, the motivation wasn't the tax savings. It was how much more she could do with that. That was the thing that got her off the fence.
And you said something really important, which is 90% of the giving in the country is cash. If you look in the distribution of assets of American households, cash is the smallest asset class that anybody has. People have stocks, they have qualified money, they have real estate, they have all sorts of other things beside cash, especially in the high net worth marketplace and the business owner marketplace. And so we're asking them to give something they don't have that much of. You can basically give virtually any asset you can think of to a charity. Now, there are different tax impacts and different effects of everything, but essentially, the right charity will take almost anything you want to give them. So that opens the space up to say, let's be more creative here. And certainly, as we talk to business owners about exiting their business, they're not going to be giving us cash. We're going to take their corporate shares or their goodwill or something to offset some of the tax they'd pay on the way out.
And even if the single issue charity doesn't have the resources, there are more and more charitable middlemen out there, so to speak, that may have a specialty in gifting complex assets. So if ABC Charity is too small and their board's not comfortable with the gifting of closely held stock, there's typically a community foundation or some other third-party charity out there that's willing to go ahead and take that upfront cost and take that upfront risk of accepting that closely held stock and then deliver the proceeds after the sale to that charity that's ill-equipped to handle that themselves.
Yeah.
There's more than one way to build the mousetrap.
This is a place where we as advisors can really add value, because sometimes a donor will say, well, I'm just going to give this thing to this charity. And I'll say, well, let's slow down a little bit. That might be the right thing to do. First of all, let's go find out if the charity will take the gift.
Yeah.
It is shocking and surprising, but most charities don't have written gift acceptance policies. And if you say, how would you like this piece of real estate in rural Iowa? They're going to say, what are you talking about? We have no capability of accepting a gift like that. So again, we have to be able to say, but we have a solution. There's this organization over here that will take that gift. They will turn it into cash, and 97% of the money is going to go to the charity you want. But let us
Right.
help you do this the right way, because otherwise, the first time someone says no, they say it's too hard. I'm going to quit. This is too much work. I'll just pay the tax, and we can't let them do that. We just owe it to them to say, wait a minute, we can get a better result.
Yeah. And I think for the business owners in particular, this is irregardless of however they may be structuring their exit. I think, the first hurdle sometimes is the idea of making the owner aware that they can go ahead and gift these assets, give away some of their closely held stock and how that works and where the benefit is and how low the risk is of losing control of the business. But I think second to that, I think sometimes there's a perception that if they're doing a certain type of exit strategy, they can't play in this. And it's irregardless of whether it's going to be a recap, whether it's going to be a sale to external buyers, whether it's going to be going public, whether it's going to be a management buyout, no matter how the transfer is happening, this can be structured. I think, between Randy and myself, I know I've definitely, with the list that we have, I know I've definitely seen cases where we've dealt with the intra-family transfer. I've seen the cases where the company's converted to an ESOP. I've seen the cases where there's been a recapitalization going on. All of these scenarios can still pose an opportunity for the donor to go ahead and make the gift. And I think the part that gets missed in this a lot of times is really emphasizing where that benefit lives in making the gift in advance of the sale rather than waiting till after.
And not only in advance of the sale, but so far in advance of the sale that there's been no agreements reached anywhere. One of the things we run into all the time is, I just signed a binding agreement to sell my business, what can I do? And then it's too late. So we have to be early in the process. We have to be talking to the business owner 1, 2, or 3 years before he's even thinking about stepping out the door. And if we can plant those seeds and say, let's start positioning these assets properly now, so that when the time comes and your hair's on fire and someone wants you to sell the business tomorrow and they got a bucket load of cash, you don't have to go scrambling and say, wait, slow down, I don't want to do this yet because I'm not ready. Because the buyer will go away and they'll never forgive you. So we have to be prepared, and the business owner has to be prepared well in advance of even thinking about an exit plan. And that takes work and patience.
Right.
But if it's done right, it can have tremendous impact on the results. After all, if a business owner is going to save $3 or $4 million in taxes because of what you've done, he's got a lot of negotiating room as to what price he can finally sell the business for, right?
Right.
And he might keep that buyer around or get better terms because he can sell for less and still have more money in his pocket, right?
And I think too, aside from that, and Randy brings up a great point about the timing of the gift. And definitely the timing is important. It definitely needs to stay ahead of any legally binding commitment to sell the company. And there's a lot of front load work that can be done to make sure that all the legal documents are reviewed. Everything's ready to go for the moment somebody is getting close to that window closing. The other thing to keep in mind that we see that a lot of donors and even sometimes, unfortunately, advisors overlook is the value of the proper valuation of the asset. That just because Bob is selling his company for $10 million and just because the value of the stock he's giving the charity is, estimated to be at $1 million, that charitable deduction is really going to rely upon an independent fair market value appraisal by a qualified appraisal. And this may or may not fit as what's already on the table in the negotiation of the appraisal that was done. A lot of times it requires special verbiage that details the fact that this is for a charitable gift. So you can overlay it on some of the appraisals you're already doing, but you're not going to be able to just pull out page 3 of your existing appraisal and submit it to the IRS and have them be okay with it. And when you're talking about, $1 million plus gift or a $3 or $4 million gift or whatever the value may be for the business owner, you really don't want to run the risk of doing that wrong. The IRS tax code for charitable giving is one of the most lengthy areas of the whole IRS code. And these types of giving strategies, are just low-hanging fruit in a lot of cases for the IRS to look at. So it's really important that the advisors are making sure that their clients are dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's in this process. Not to mention the idea of just being cognizant of how the company is structured. For the charities that are accepting this, whether it's real estate or whether it's going to be an LLC or a limited partnership or an S Corp, sometimes there could be issues with unrelated business income tax that come into play that the owner and the financial advisor just need to be cognizant of. There may be the requirement for the business owner to be able to contribute some upfront liquidity to help with carrying costs, especially if we're talking about something like real estate where there may be property taxes or other things coming into play while the charity's holding that asset. So there's a lot of different moving pieces that come into this where it's really important that the buyer has an accurate understanding to help lay out the time that's needed, to help reinforce the fact that this is too complex to be a knee-jerk thing that happens at the 11th hour. There's a lot that can be done in the pre-planning stages that helps with a lot of those issues.
There's a lot that needs to be done in the pre-planning stages so that you don't run into those last-minute snags.
Right.
If you go in thinking it's one thing and at the closing table find out that, oh, I forgot to tell you, this is an S Corp, it's game over. So you really have to be careful and thorough in advance of any effort to sell a company and know whether it's going to be an asset sale or a stock sale. And, all of the things that you need to know it's very complicated. That doesn't mean you can't learn it. Everything can be learned, and there are people that know this stuff inside out. But this is, don't try this at home. This is a tricky thing, and it's really important to get good facts and good answers and have your client, do the rigorous stuff ahead of time so you know what you're dealing with. Because this won't happen by accident, and if you do it wrong, one of my mentors used to call these CEMs, a career-ending mistake. You don't want one of those.
Yeah, there is a lot to take in, but the good part about collaboration is, that's why you create a team. That's why this isn't something that is a single person sport. That's why, you have the professional advisors, you have the CPAs, the attorneys, everybody to get together and think about the best things to look at. I mean, not only are you looking at the charitable deduction limitations, but you're looking at the cases like unrelated business income tax. If you're looking at the incorporation of charitable trusts, you have different things like the 75/20 rates that you need to consider. If there's going to be, real estate, things will change if there's debt on the property. There's a lot of different moving pieces that come into that related to not just the valuation, but also the idea of, some of the ways that this is going to be managed and dealt with even after the date of the gift that comes into play. And that helps determine the value of what giving vehicles you're going to incorporate in this process. Not all of it is going to be direct giving. Not all of it is going to be maybe with, a donor advised fund or a private foundation. There's so many different tools in the tool shed that can be tied into some of these strategies.
Yeah, they're just, again, what you look for is having the most arrows in your quiver as possible. So having a working knowledge of all of the different types of gifts, all the various code sections that kind of relate to those gifts is very helpful. You may never use any of them, but it's good to know that they're there so that you can eliminate them. Some gifts just don't fit certain things, and so what?
And even just at the bare minimum, a basic understanding that there's more to the world than just the creation of a private foundation, or that that there's, or even just realizing that some of the best solutions may actually be a combination of 2 or 3 or 4 different types of vehicles. Being open to the idea, or not getting caught up in the idea of a go-to one-trick pony that is supposed to fit every situation, because every business owner, every donor, regardless of being a business owner, is going to be different and have unique needs, just like when you're picking investments for them. So being cognizant of that in that process is probably the biggest first step that any advisor can take.
My own personal path and this, how I got into this is after the '86 Tax Act, we were looking for various ways that we could help our clients in our financial planning practice save taxes. And I saw that there was an article about this new company that was teaching guys how to use charitable remainder trusts. So I went down and I learned all about charitable remainder trusts. And I came back and I was a one-trick pony. I knew one thing. And I went around trying to get everybody to do a charitable remainder trust. And I was somewhat successful at that, but then I realized, wait a minute, I need to know all this other stuff because I'm just a one-trick pony. And when I run out of charitable remainder trust, I'm out of stuff to do.
Right.
And so I went on this long and very arduous educational journey so that I would learn all of the tools that were available to me, not just one. And again, it's helped me immeasurably. I'm very thankful I started where I started, and I started how I started, and I didn't make any huge mistakes because I had good mentors and good help around me. But now my knowledge base has broadened so much that virtually anything that comes up, I feel so comfortable that there is an answer. We'll find an answer. Whatever it is, there's an answer.
Yeah. And
No, I'm just going to comment from your experience. Many of us, we do things the same way we have for many, many years. And what I'm hearing from both of your remarks is a lot of encouragement, and maybe a little bit of a challenge, but a lot of encouragement for the advisors on the team to slow down and to seek out the other resources rather than continue to do the things that we have the way that we do them.
3 or 4 years ago, I had no idea what a pooled income fund was, really. Now, in almost every charitable discussion, it starts to come up. It's applied so widely and so broadly in today's world that the right pooled income fund, for instance, and I'm not about a particular strategy, it's just, you just have to be attuned to what's going on in the world and what makes things valuable at certain times in our economic history. This, 20 years ago or 10 years ago, you wouldn't have looked at these. Now it's kind of interesting. So how do we incorporate it into our current thinking and stay in tune with what's going on in our economy and what's available technology-wise and all the other things?
I think that is exactly why we have an audience today, for the reasons that you just mentioned. And with that, I am going to take our mandatory 10-minute break, and we'll be back shortly.
So we're top of the hour.
By backing visionaries, investing in long shots, and building on hard-won knowledge to find powerful new weapons. We're attacking cancer by making it less scary and confusing, less stressful, less lonely. We're attacking cancer by showing up every day, driving people, boosting people, picking them up when they're down. We're attacking cancer by providing a free place to stay, by building a community, a home for healing. We're attacking cancer with stubborn hope, relentless energy, and a promise that everywhere cancer rears its despicable head, we will be there to blunt its effects and lessen its power. From the cellular level to the street level, with brilliant new thinking and in the darkest hours, the American Cancer Society is attacking from every angle.
Hello and welcome back. Based on the discussions that we've been having so far in the previous hour, I feel like regardless of how long I've been practicing, regardless of my experience in this particular space, or my interest as well, the opportunity may be significant going forward. In fact, I'm curious to our experts, how big do you see this opportunity? Randy?
Well, it's interesting. I heard an analogy, or got a word picture 25 or 30 years ago from, again, one of my many mentors, who painted this picture that has stuck with me all this time. And he said, you know, the opportunity is so big that it's as if we were to walk down to the Mississippi River with a teaspoon and try to empty it out. Now, if that doesn't give everybody some hope, there's so much opportunity that you could be shoulder to shoulder with your planning competitors, and there's no competition. We just cannot handle all of the opportunity that is available to us if we do this correctly. And the big thing for me is that, you know, not that we're going to help the business owners save taxes or, you know, make their lives better, but money that goes to charitable causes goes to charitable causes. And that makes our society better. That's going to make our communities better. That's going to make the futures better for our kids and for my grandkids, you know, 50 or 100 years from now. And that's what's important to me, is how we can make things better. Instead of just complaining, you know, why don't we sit back and do something about it?
Right. And I think one of the main reasons why, in particular in this session, we're targeting the business owners is because that is such a huge opportunity. And I want to make sure we're realizing that we're not talking about the multi-billion-dollar titans of industry. A lot of these are business owners just like we're encountering every day in our practices. You know, if we assume that there's 6 million businesses that have more than one employee, you know, the average business has $5 million in sales, maybe $2.5 million in value. There's staggering statistics about the fact that 80% of businesses that are under $50 million are put on the market and they don't sell because they're not equipped to sell. You know, we've been talking and giving the impression that, you know, these are businesses that are ripe and ready to move. And the sad thing is, a lot of our business owner clients aren't even close to beginning the business exit process. And that's really the first step. I mean, it's great to have this charitable component, but if the business isn't anywhere near ready to sell, then there's really nothing. There's a little bit you can do, and we'll talk about that in a second, but it's not going to have nearly as much impact as when you've got a business owner that's ready to sell and is built to sell, so to speak. So, you know, the impact on the prosperity of the country from not just, you know, like Randy said, an economic backdrop, but a social backdrop can be huge. I mean, if 8 out of 10 businesses aren't selling when they're first put on the market because they're not ready, you know, we only need to make it 7 out of 10 instead of 8 out of 10 to have a huge impact on the change. You know, 1 or 2 more business owners having a successful exit can mean a ton to all of us in this space, not only as a practitioner on the for-profit side in the legal and tax and financial communities, but for the nonprofit. You know, the sales of those businesses can generate trillions of dollars in impact that can trigger, you know, millions, if not billions of dollars in philanthropy that can reshape every problem we're trying to fix. You know, how many folks could go into trade schools to learn how to be in manufacturing jobs? How many folks can fix, you know, any of the problems that we're facing? And, you know, really part of that first step is really how do we make sure we're getting the business owners better prepared for that exit? And that's part and parcel with this discussion. You know, there's a lot of business owners that if they were to pass away tomorrow, the company would collapse because they haven't made any plans. They haven't been able to vision what the future would be. And therefore, you know, they feel like no plan is better than trying to create a plan. And that's not fair for anybody. That's not fair for the employees. It's not fair for the business owner. You know, so how many ways can we create, you know, as the Exit Planning Institute talks about, a life after business plan? How do you work on creating that? Or for the ones that have exited, many of them have been profoundly unhappy with their exit, according to PricewaterhouseCoopers. Not just because of the taxes that they paid that they weren't expecting to pay, but some of it has really been geared towards the idea that they didn't know what to do. They got tired of playing golf. They didn't think they'd ever get tired of playing golf, but it can happen. And they just didn't have a strong enough vision to last them beyond the first year or two after retirement. They visited all the grandkids. All the kids and grandkids said, "Okay, Grandpa, Grandma, good to see you. Are you going to go home now?" What else are they going to do? So, how are we helping business owners really create not just, a successful exit on the books from a dollars and cents standpoint, but a successful exit in a well-rounded capacity that goes beyond just the dollars and cents of the exit? And I know in a lot of cases, one of the ways that I've theorized about is, there's a lot of activity for those business owners that don't have successful exits because they don't have enough value in the business, or they take their business off the market because they don't have enough value in the business. So how can we start educating the business owners by maybe looking at this as that value proposition? Once again, going back to the idea of philanthropy can have its own return on investment. Charitable giving can have its own return on investment. And there's a lot of business owners that are concerned with corporate culture. They believe it's their corporate responsibility to be a good community steward. There's more and more research out there that talks about the linkage between socially responsible efforts and brand recognition. There's a lot that's tied into the idea of retaining talent and helping to train up employees' skills through the ideas of volunteering and being engaged in their community when there may not be a position for them to move up to in the company per se. There's a lot that ties in with the pride in the company. There's a lot of growth within the idea of the corporate giving programs, the idea of, almost like how United Way does it, where, every employee takes a little bit out of their paycheck and can contribute to various causes. There's a lot that we've talked about in regards to, building a brand image around the corporate giving, taking the idea of the company as a donor, and rather than basing the giving off of the mindset of the owner, looking at the company as its own physical being. What is the head and heart of the company? And what is the giving that best resembles the head and the heart of the company with the company as a donor? That's where a lot of these companies are really creating differentiation. And to build that in, and more data is proving out the idea that this can create a greater ROI. How many business owners wouldn't benefit from the idea that their employee retention has gone up by 50%, or their net profits have gone up by 6 to 8%? All of these are different things that, if done right, can increase value to the company, and I think in a lot of ways can help create the bridge to helping the donor be more open to that succession plan or that exit plan that includes that charitable component.
I heard a story 15 years ago maybe from a family that had already had their liquidity event. This was a son-in-law, but had been very active in the business. And they actually were a multinational company. They had in 5 or 6 different countries and on several different continents, and they made very simple stuff. They made automotive parts, but something every car in the world needed, right? So it grew to be a very big company. But they noticed in the Chicago area where their headquarters was, and they had a plant in the city and they had a plant in the suburbs. And in summer, their absenteeism would grow very high, and they couldn't understand why. And so they started asking around, and they found out that they had a lot of single mothers that were employees, and when their kids were out of school, they didn't have anywhere to go, so they would miss days because they had to stay home with the kids. So instead of penalizing the employees, the company bought a plot of land and ran a summer camp for their employees, and their kids went free, and no employees left. Their absenteeism went down to practically zero. They went back to kind of normal levels. But there was another benefit, which is city kids met suburban kids and became friends. And there was a cross-cultural enhancement that was, unexpected. No one had even thought about the value that brought. but the loyalty of those employees, most of them stayed for 15, 20, 30 years. Where else were they going to go and get a benefit like this? So, if we think of our employees as assets, not liabilities, as the things that make our business what it is, it can make a profound difference. And it seems common sense to me, but it seems like it's also done less and less. I mean, that's real internal philanthropy. That's using the corporation to better society, to better the families of the people that work for you. And it was brilliant. It was just brilliant.
Yeah.
Again, it's a story I'll never forget.
Yeah, and just think of the ripple effect of that from a recruiting standpoint. 10 years ago, I was at a Women in Finance conference, and we're, maybe not quite 10 years ago, because we were talking in the wake of 2008, 2009. And the woman was, she had her own RIA, and she needed a reason for, everything was just so hideous in 2008, 2009. She just needed a reason to help her employees feel better. And everybody was suffering, everybody was struggling. So she had created a strategy where she just gave every employee $100 at the beginning of November and said, when we get together for our Christmas lunch, because we're going to do a lunch this year, we can't afford to have the big party, but when we get together for our Christmas lunch, I want to hear how you use that $100. You could use it for yourself. If you need to buy Christmas toys for the kids, go for it. You can use it to help somebody else. You can, however you feel you can best utilize that money, go for it. And they had the lunch, and there were all these great stories of different ways that $100 helped. Somebody happened to be getting his tires changed, and there was a woman there that was struggling with an automotive cost that she couldn't afford, and he just gave her the $100 to put towards that, and she was so grateful. And there were some employees that needed to use it so that the kids could have a Christmas, and that was fine, but a lot of really good stories. And the next year the company was beginning to rebound, but everybody was asking, are we going to do this again? She's like, yeah, sure, why not? Everybody had so much fun with it. And 2-3 years down the road, they're still doing it, and the economy's improving. She's looking to hire. She's getting to the phase where she's bringing candidates in to meet with current employees. And in every instance, those employees, that was the first thing they would talk about, was the fact that they did that as a company and how cool that was. And she never went into that thinking that it would have the ripple effect that it did. But it became something that her company was known for in regards to how she treated her employees, and the ripple effect of folks wanted to be there because what it meant to them as to how she was treated and looked upon as a business owner, because she did little things like that. And, the ripple effect on this is huge. So I know, Randy, you had a case study that you wanted to start talking about.
Oh, so we're going to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. This is an actual case. Names changed, of course, to protect the innocent, because their names aren't really I and you got lucky. It's Jim and Jean got lucky. No. Again, I was fortunate enough to be brought into this case by another advisor. And it's interesting, just as a kind of a side note, in the last 4 or 5 months, I have met 4 business owners, all over the age of 75. The lowest net worth is $35 million. The highest is $250 to $300 million. Kind of unknown. We haven't seen the whole balance sheet, but we're pretty close. I'm pretty sure it's more like $300 million than $250 million. Not one of those families, not one of them, had any estate planning at all. And I think we as advisors take for granted. And this has been a wake-up call for me over the last 8 or 10 years, is we think that because someone was smart enough to run their business really well and turn it into a lot of money, that they have good advice and that they have good planning in place. And I have found more and more that that's not true. And I think a lot of advisors are intimidated by families of wealth and think that they don't know how to deal with them or don't know how to talk to them. Or they don't have the skill set to deal with them. Believe me, they are as naive and misinformed about estate planning and income tax planning as all the other segments of our population. Yes, there are some sophisticated people out there, but they're a minority. And so, again, don't be afraid. by and large, we can help anybody, no matter how much wealth they have, no matter how little wealth they have. We can do them a world of good. So this is the Got Lucky family. They have 2 children. One's married, the other isn't. This is a net worth of about $35 million. It is largely illiquid. And he's the male in the family, has built a business. It's now a significant engineering business. And he's 75 and getting ready to retire. It's a C Corp. He owns about $8 million still. He's been selling off shares on an annual basis for the last 8 or 10 years, but he doesn't have a signed agreement to do anything. He basically every year goes to the 4 or 5 partners that are able to buy his shares and says, do you want to buy this year? And they say yes, because essentially they're going to want him out of the business before he drops over at his desk. Although he's the healthiest 75-year-old I've ever seen. His kids are not in the business, never will be, so the succession plan is a management buyout. This is essentially the management is buying them out, but there's not a real solid plan. It's kind of every year is a little different. He essentially sells for note and takes back financing, 5-year notes, things like that. So there's no obligation to sell. He lives a nice lifestyle. They spend about $800,000 a year. That's what he'd like to have. And who am I to tell him he shouldn't be able to do that? They have old revocable trusts, so I kind of lied. I mean, they do have some planning. That trust is essentially useless in this world. They have no life insurance. He's never been a fan of life insurance, isn't interested in life insurance, never saw the point of paying for life insurance. And they have essentially no liquidity, because what he's done with extra money as he's gotten it, he's bought real estate. So he has lots of real estate, and he's in lots of different real estate deals. He owns most of the real estate improperly, in my opinion. I'm not a lawyer, I don't play one on TV, but when I see somebody in general partnerships with other people, I go, that's not a good idea. So again, there's a lot of things to be done here. Now, interestingly, when I first met him, and I looked at his tax return and talked to him, we talked about charity. And I was kind of interested, but not, he said, I did one thing once and it kind of didn't go the way I wanted, and I'm not really keen on it. I said, well, let's reconsider that. What if I showed you different ways you could do things, and we're still going to make sure you can live the way you want to live, and by the way, when you sell the company, your shares of the company every year, you're paying a ton of tax. He lives in a very high tax state, and you're given 35 or 40% to the government anyway. Why don't we just let you keep that and put that to work for you and the family? And so we've had evolving discussions over that, and his engagement in the charitable side has grown over time. He's much more interested. He's much more engaged. His daughter teaches at a certain kind of school, a faith-based school. He wants to make sure that school stays funded well. He wants his daughters to be involved in giving now. He now sees that as kind of a core value of the family, in fact. So there's, it doesn't always happen the first time you have a conversation.
Early and often.
Yeah, sometimes people just have to think about it and think about, what they're looking at in their own lives. And if he knows he's going to be okay, and he knows his kids are going to be okay, then what's next? What can I do that's more than me, more than my family? Is it the government, or is it something else? And in his case, it's been something else. So that's been kind of a revelation, and it's been very, very enjoyable to kind of participate, even though I don't often get to meet face to face with many of the clients I work with. This is someone who I've seen several times, and he's just they're just delightful, engaging people that you can tell they're full of life and want to do more with what they have. So like many people, they want to maintain their lifestyle. They want to keep living on $800,000 a year, but he doesn't want to pay $1 million a year in income tax either. Who does? He would like to not pay so much tax when he's bailing out of his company, now that he knows that he's got an option. He would like to get the philanthropic plan in place, and in fact, he has asked me to come talk to his family and meet with them and explain the planning that we've done and what they're going to get and what they're going to be able to give away on an annual basis and how they're going to be able to do it. And I think that's a real, it's kind of a privilege for me to be able to do that. I'm trying to think of the right word. There's many of them. You know, he doesn't want to pay estate tax if he doesn't have to. Again, he was of the mindset that he didn't have a choice. And again, if you tell people that estate taxes are an optional tax, that they can opt out of the system, it's kind of like a light goes on. Why didn't my advisors tell me that? I don't know. I'm not your other advisors. I'm just me. I'm telling you it's true. And again, you know, he would like to protect those assets. So this is somebody who's not in a very asset protection friendly state. And I said, you know, we can do your work in another state that offers better benefits. Again, not something he knew. Now, his law firm has somebody who practices in this other state, and they've never told him. It's interesting what we deal with, and so we're having conversations with them and saying this is what he really wants to do. How do we make this happen for him? You know, tell us how we work together to make all these things implemented. Now that the plan is kind of done, what's interesting is, and here's a guy who's 75 and has waited until he's 75. How fast can we get it done? Mm-hmm. How fast can we make all this happen? You know, let's not slow down. And so, you know, he really likes the results, and he really wants the results for his family. He really wants the results for his kids and his grandkids. He wants to make sure his wife is taken care of. You know, all those things have suddenly become very important to him. So that's, you know, that's kind of the gratification that comes out of doing this kind of work. And maybe somebody will show me what's next, because the checks. So one of the things that I like to do when I design work, I like to model things out, because I think one of the things that happens with many families, no matter what their wealth is in order for them to know they're going to be okay, they really want to know that we're taking them to a better place. And even though numbers and plans are often not correct, they certainly provide a framework or a point of reference, right? So they give them something to say, well, if we do all these things, I should go here. If I don't do these things, I'm going to go here, and I like over here better than I like over, you know, where I am. So, you know, I can act on these. So one of the things I like to do is show them in kind of real life what this would be like for them. So we've actually prepared these kind of fake checks. I don't think you can cash this anywhere, but it does present kind of a real life, this is what it would be like for someone if you died tomorrow. Here's how much money would go to your family, not an insignificant amount, certainly a substantial amount, but here's how much goes to Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. Here's how much goes to whatever causes you don't really care about. Very little of this is going to come back to your community. If this is okay with you, then we've got nothing further to talk about. And the next thing I show them is, okay, well, you're not dead today, right? You're going to live a period of time. Let's take this out to your life expectancy. What happens if you don't change anything? And again, the numbers tend to grow over time. Now, during the course of this planning, the tax law changed. We have a bigger exemption, but the problem didn't really change very much because his assets are still growing. It's not like the money stops, right? It still keeps growing, and it's growing faster than they spend it. So, you know, his wealth is growing over time, and that's a good sign, right? And it's also, again, as we deal with business owners, you know, they're used to running the business and controlling everything and making things grow, and it's really hard, often, the big leap of faith to convince someone that owning assets is not necessarily the best thing. That having growth outside of your estate is a better thing than having growth inside of your estate. And if you would have started this company in some entity that you didn't own but could control, that would have been better for you than owning this entity the way you own it currently. Mm-hmm. Now, it's too late to do that with him, but it's not too late to get some assets out of his estate now with various tools and techniques, including some charitable techniques. And let's see what the results are. And the results are much, much better. And we haven't finished all the planning. We've only shown them 3 or 4 things, because I've also found that if you, dump too much on somebody all at once, it's way too much for them to handle. So we try to take this in kind of small bites. We were all taught the example of Stephen Covey's big rocks, right? Let's handle the big rocks first, and then we'll handle the little stones and pebbles later. So we'll clean this up, and he'll end up with a 0 estate tax at the end of the day. But we've done a number of things, and one of the structures we put in place is a charitable vehicle that we're going to put his corporate stock in. He'll get an income tax charitable deduction based on a couple of factors. And the way this particular vehicle is set up, the management team can buy the shares from the entity. There'll be cash now in the charitable trust that he's setting up. But not only is he going to benefit from it, and his wife is going to benefit from it, but we've made this a 3-generation gift. So for his children's lives and for his grandchildren's lives, they will be the beneficiaries of this stream of charitable income. And I think that's probably the thing that won him over the most, because we now have a creditor-protected, asset-protected stream of income for his children and his grandchildren. They can't lose it. They can't screw it up. It's not in his estate. It's mostly out of his estate. And at the end of the day, his children are going to take that $7 or $8 million. It's going to turn into $25 or $30 million over time, and they're going to distribute that money to charities at the end of their lives. And it's just profoundly so powerful when you put this kind of planning in place for any client to think about it. What we used in the charitable case was a pooled income fund, a multi-generational pooled income fund. We've looked at a number of other things. This seemed to get the result the best way for him. Not saying that's the only tool to use, it just was the tool that seemed to fit him. We were doing another trust where he can, with the new law, most people can't itemize their deductions. And he wanted to find a way to be able to still give money to charity and find a tax benefit from it. Not that he's totally driven by tax, but under the new law, if you set up an irrevocable trust and gift money to it and use some of his big exemption, her big exemption, if it's a non-grantor trust, it's a tax-paying trust. Well, if the tax-paying trust earns income and distributes all the income to charity, it's tax deductible to the trust. So we're going to take maybe $1 million, maybe a little bit more. We're going to put that money in this irrevocable trust. And he's going to let his daughters give away the money every year. And he won't be paying income tax on the earnings, so we're going to save him whatever the tax is on whatever $1 million or $2 million would make on an annual basis. And the trust will never pay tax because we're going to give all the money away. And see, this is helping him exit his business with grace. I wish I would have met him when he first started selling his share of the business, because he wouldn't have paid all the tax he's already paid. But I met him when I met him. So, fortunately, he didn't have a carved in stone plan. He had a plan that we could work with, so that we were able to affect the changes we wanted to affect at the time, from this point forward.
Yeah, and I think what I like about how you emphasize this, Randy, is that whole idea of the 2 out of 3. With the 3 checks that you use as your visual, it is kind of showing the idea that you can give to your family, you can give to Uncle Sam, or you can give to charity, and how that spreads out. Another good thing that I think I've heard before, and I think I might have heard it from you in our talks yesterday, was the idea of, as that catalyst, the business owner may already be supporting charity. They may be highly philanthropic to the tunes of millions of dollars. That charity just happens to be Uncle Sam. And it's a matter of they can either, give the money to Uncle Sam's charity and let Uncle Sam choose the programs that they want to support, which most business owners are not typically fond of, the business programs or the social programs that Uncle Sam supports. So they could let Uncle Sam dictate the philanthropy, or they can go ahead and self-direct their philanthropy themselves by using these charitable vehicles and strategies. And I think these illustrations are just a great tool for that, to get that point across.
I think business owners have had their success by taking control
Yeah.
versus being controlled. However, oftentimes in this space, they allow the government and the tax code to control them, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's so counterintuitive in a lot of ways, but unfortunately, I think that's just one area that's kind of fallen through the cracks because they've been so caught up in the daily operations of things that when we get to this stage with the planning and the exit, it's just not something that's as orchestrated as well as or as controlled as well as it could be in that sense.
Yeah, without fail, I can't think of a business owner that I've met, and I've met a number of them over my career. I cannot think of one who does not do everything within their human power to pay as little income tax as possible, not without cheating or breaking the law. I don't abide by those guys, but every business owner I know wants to pay the least amount of tax possible. And then we start talking about their exit plan. And at the end of the day, without good planning, they essentially just give it all back. They say,
Yeah.
okay, I'm leaving the business, so here's $20 million, have at it. And it just makes no sense to me. They've spent their life building this business up so they could walk away, or cash out, or however they're going to exit, and then they fail to execute an exit plan that puts the most money in their pocket or control. And again, it's not about ownership, and we get confused with those terms. It's really about control. It's really about, are they going to be able to have the life they want with the money that they need to take care of themselves and their family? And after that, why own anything?
Yeah, and as Randy said, in this case, the main vehicle used was the pooled income fund, but it could very easily be other vehicles. There could have been some type of charitable remainder trust. In this case, a flip CRT might have been appropriate, or in a lot of cases with some of these transitions, we've seen the donor advised fund or the private foundation come into play for these types of circumstances. Or especially when you're thinking of, a CRT strategy, it could be a CRT combined with a donor advised fund or a private foundation. There's a lot of different areas to maneuver in this as to figuring out what is the best overall solution for the family and for the business owner in this case.
And it's almost never one thing. It's almost always a combination. I mean, we have 3 or 4 different strategies integrated in here that are going to be vital to the ongoing, future of the family.
Right.
We've only talked about a couple of them because only a couple of them are charitable. The other things are non-charitable strategies, but they really make a difference. And how they all fit together and how they all weave together is what makes it really interesting. Is we use this strategy to accomplish this, and we use this strategy to accomplish that, and we use this to, offset your income tax and provide income and avoid capital gains tax. Those are all important. It's not like one is more important than the other, but they all have to be put together in such a way that they're cohesive and they don't disrupt each other.
Right.
And they don't disrupt the client's lifestyle.
Yeah. And that being said, we're talking about a strategy that included the shares of the business, but, in this client's case, he also had $4 million in real estate. And it may have made sense, depending on the circumstances, that maybe, for timing issues or for whatever reason, the business may not have been an appropriate transaction. Maybe there had already been a management buyout agreement. Maybe he was caught in that window of, losing that capital gains benefit because of how the deal was structured. The fallback position on that could have been a gift of real estate. He could have put that, depending on how the real estate was structured, into a donor advised fund or a private foundation or a charitable trust to be able to get those benefits, offset some of the gains that were tied into that real estate, and still have a workable solution that may benefit him in a way, maybe not to the nth degree that it would have being the business stock, because it might not have as much gains, but still create some kind of viable offset that, it may be a better play because in his mind, that's less of a loss of control than giving up the business. It's an easier thing for him to part with than the perception of losing control in the business, which typically, when we see these structured, as Randy mentioned, there's ways businesses are structured where you can, ownership and control could be 2 different things. It is possible to give away ownership without necessarily giving up control. It's not uncommon for us with gifts of closely held stock to have it be non-voting shares, for us to be in tag-along provisions, so to speak, of any of the sales that come down the pipeline later on. So there's a lot of great ways to go ahead and structure these so that they can provide added benefit in that process. And really looking at the scenarios, plug in the numbers or find somebody that can plug in the numbers for you. This is an area where, once again, that team sport, having the CPA run the analysis or talking with the charitable planners that are helping you with running this analysis in what makes the most sense. And as we've talked about, sometimes we don't have the value of timing. Sometimes, you get that call from your client and they say, hey, Rob, sold my business last week. You got $15 million to invest. And you're saying, oh my God, what about the tax planning? What are we going to, there's things that can be done after the fact in that case as well, to go ahead and implement some of these strategies with the cash proceeds to still create some kind of benefit so that there is, that savings that's attributed.
Yeah, a big part of what we have to do and what all advisors have to do in doing this kind of planning, and Laura, you made a bunch of great points about other things that could have been done or other strategies that could have been deployed for this family, is that we have to listen and we have to ask really good questions. What are assets that you're just not willing to part with? What are things that are just sacred to you? A lot of times you find out, especially in high net worth families, they have a legacy property someplace, the family vacation home or something, where they've all gone every year forever, and they just, no matter what you do, they're not going to part with it. So leave it out of your equation. Let's find a way to keep this, is what you want to do. So how do we fund its usage in perpetuity for the family? How do we make that happen for you? So it's really important that we are very attentive to what our clients are saying to us about what they want, what their asset, what they want their assets to look like, what they want their life to look like, how they want to live, what they're going to do going forward. It's probably one of the most critical things we can do, because crunching numbers is, there's plenty of software that does that, but you got to know what numbers you're going to crunch, right? You got to know what you're going to look at. So there's a sorting process that has to take place, and it's always driven by the client. And you're going to propose something that they will have never heard of before, so you have to have the patience to explain, here's how this works. I don't know why you've never heard of it before, but I know it works. You have to trust the person you hired to do this, because you're asking them to say, sign here, and this is going over here forever. And to do that that's a big jump. And so we have to be very cautious and very careful and very honoring of our clients that this is a big change we're asking them to make, and that they may have to take it in small steps, and they're going to have to trust that you're the person that they can believe in, that's doing the right thing for them.
And I think that's where the value of those blended strategies come into play. The benefit to charity and the benefit to the family, the idea of the pooled income funds or the charitable trusts. There's a lot of discussion about charitable remainder trusts, but it's not often that I hear a lot of folks talk about the charitable lead trust. And, the easiest way that I can talk about charitable lead trust is for all the talk that I hear advisors do about grants. It's just a charitable grant. It's the same concept. If you're proposing the idea of a grant to your clients, there's no reason why you can't propose the idea of a charitable lead trust. The asset reverts back to the family after a term of years. Charity gets benefit for a term of years. And in most cases, when it's done in the client's lifetime, we're not talking about the Jackie O, when she dies, it's going to go into a clat and whatever else. But in the lifetime, the charitable lead trust can be an extremely helpful tool for benefiting charity while benefiting the family at the same time. And often it doesn't have to be tens of millions of dollars. Randy and I have seen some of those being done at $500,000, at $250,000, at $2-3 million. We've seen it especially with young kids, where the family may be putting money into the charitable lead trust that they intend to be the college tuition, or that they intend to help the kids, buy their first home at some day. But why not do the charitable benefit now? Use that charitable benefit to train the kids while they're growing up. We've seen, I have a friend that's an attorney that she uses it with the pro athletes that she works with. And I realize they're not business owners, but it's a great tool for when, you have these pro athletes that have 5 to 10 years of extremely high income, extremely, high wealth because of their contracts. but the longevity of their career is limited. You know, what are they going to have after that time when their playing career is done, or all the other things that come into play? You know, so the Charitable Lead Trust can be a great tool, and we have an example there of how that can work with some of the proceeds, but it's often a great tool for after the fact, when it's kind of like the events happen, now what do we do? How do we make up some of that loss?
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things we glanced over but really didn't get in much depth of is, and I know this happens to you, but it happens to me, in November and December, right? First of all, I don't know what the number is, but something like 85 or 90% of the giving is done in those 2 months.
Oh, easy.
Yeah.
Easy.
So, this is when we're busy, right? Nobody plans in January or February when they should. They all wait till the end of the year.
Yeah.
But normally in November and December, and this last year was no exception, I had at least a half a dozen and maybe 10 calls. I have a client who sold their business in June and just realized that they have $6 million in tax. And, what can we do? Well, first of all, let's start and let's roll back the clock, but we can't roll back the clock, so we can't get in our time machine and go back. What are the things we can do? We've sold the business. And so it's, now they've got 2 months to make what could be a life-changing decision. This is why we've been emphasizing for the last hour and a half, we need to get the business owner before he sells, not after he sells, but sometimes they've already sold and we have to deal with that. So if we have to deal with that, what are some of the solutions? And we brought up a couple. One is a charitable lead trust of some sort can be very effective. There are charitable lead trusts where for every dollar you put in, you can get $1 of income tax deduction. That's not bad. $1 million in is $1 million income tax deduction. That'll make a difference, right? That's one. Again, the pooled income fund that I mentioned, depending on the age of the client may get a gigantic income tax deduction and get income for the rest of their life. Is it going to make the same difference as if they had done the pooled income fund prior to the sale? No, it's not going to be as good, but nothing we could do about that. Can they use a CRT? Perhaps. Can they use a donor advised fund? Absolutely. Always a good idea. And if they're at this point they have cash, and in 2018 we think they're going to get 60% of their adjusted gross income. The difficulty when they give to a donor advised fund, of course, is they won't get income back. So again, these are all the things that we need to weigh as we're talking to that client or to that advisor about what's the client really need, what do they want, what is it they're trying to accomplish, as opposed to let's just save them tax.
Right.
Who cares how we do it? Which is, what happens 99% of the time. Oh, you mean we have to ask those questions? We really have to be careful. Sometimes they can go right to charity and do a gift annuity.
Yeah.
Depending on their age and the circumstances, there can be fairly significant income tax deductions for gifts of a gift annuity. Again, depends on the charity, depends on the state you're in, depends on a lot of things. And of course, they can just give money to charity. They may just want to write a check for $100,000 or $1 million,
right at their college, or
right to their college. So there are things that can be done from a charitable planning standpoint, and we shouldn't ignore those, because a lot of times we're going to be brought in late, and we still have to do our best job, even though we didn't get them early enough. That's still our responsibility to try to help them any way we can. So.
And once again, we just can't emphasize enough that this really is a team sport. I mean, this really does the whole process. I mean, from soup to nuts, from exit preparation to the exit planning to the implementation to the charitable component, all of that takes a well-planned team, and not just a well-planned team, but a team that's actually going to collaborate. As I know you were sharing with us a story about collaboration versus cooperation when you first showed up yesterday. So, how can we go and make sure we're all playing in the sandbox effectively together? And how can we make sure that I had a corporate leader years ago that always talked about the idea that knowledge shared is knowledge squared. And I think in any case where we've seen well done collaboration, that has been proven 100-fold. How can we go ahead and make sure that we are actually collaborating with the other folks at the table, that we're really working cohesively together on those projects to help create the best success for the clients?
Yeah, and one of the things we really have to do, especially with our business owner clients, if you say, listen, I want to talk to your attorney, and I want to talk to your CPA, and I want to talk to whoever else helps you make these decisions, what they're hearing is the bill being run up, you know, and not that they don't want to pay the right price, but they don't want to spend more than they have to. And I think when I talk to business owners, what I say is, if we're all working together, it's going to save you money in the long run. It's going to stop problems from happening that you're never going to see because they're never going to happen, because we're all, you know, we're all rowing the boat together. And it's really, really important to get the key advisors all talking together without the client present, so that we can say, you know, let's let the skeletons out of the closet. Let's see who, you know, who's going to do what. How are we going to do it? What are your best ideas? You know, why won't that work? Why will that work? Without the client there, so that when we talk to the client, he knows that he's got the best plan possible because everybody important to him has been in on it. And I think that's really, really critical. It is a whole lot different than me sitting in a corner designing a plan and then dumping it on his attorney and saying, oh, by the way, Jack, you know, you and I got lucky, want you to draft these documents for him.
Yeah.
How's the attorney going to feel about that? I know how
Yeah.
I'd feel, and I wouldn't be happy. I would say, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And the plan will get sabotaged.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing in it for them to say this is a good idea.
And it's cost versus value. And, you know, advisors know how to do that. I'm sure most of the advisors that are listening in this presentation today are not the cheapest in what they do. They know how to justify their value to the clients. And that value proposition isn't exclusive to them. A lot of these folks at the table could provide a lot of value. Yes, they have some costs, but they can provide a lot of value. And I think especially for business owners, you know, no business owner wants to see money wasted. So if you can spend a little more money up front to have a great plan, rather than spending 5 different attempts at trying to create an okay plan, I think most of them would agree that the path of least resistance is spending that little more up front to have that great plan. Or, you know, as Randy said yesterday when we were talking, you know, you're not going to bring in your primary physician to do open heart surgery. You know, I mean, you need specialists at the table, and those come, you know, at a cost. But the benefit 9 times out of 10 far outweighs the cost.
And I always like to think, you know, our clients deserve the best. They deserve the very best. Otherwise, why are we serving them? If they don't get the best result, we haven't done our job. So we have to tell them how to get the best result. They don't know. And it's up to us to inform them that, listen, I've done this however many times I've done it, 50 or 100, and here's what I know, this works. And over here, this doesn't work. So if you want to do the doesn't work kind, I'm probably not the right guy for you, because I don't want to fail. And I don't want to fail because you want me to succeed for you. You want us to succeed. This team is talking about all of your wealth all at once, how to make it work best. And that's worth us collaborating. That's worth us working together, not doing this separately.
And I know there's been a lot that we've thrown at different folks. And, you know, I think there's probably folks that are listening that just want to know, you know, where do we begin? How do we get started? And, you know, these are just a couple quick questions that I've always thrown out there, especially when you're dealing with business owners, and especially taking under the construct that some of this might start as a value proposition for the business and things that the business can consider within their own giving, not just the business owner and their own personal philanthropy. So, you know, what are their goals and interests? You know, what are the things that they're passionate about? What are the things that they care most about? You know, what are their values? What are they currently doing? And why are they doing it? You know, I've had a lot of very smart people that are very active in their communities and engagement. And they know their kids and grandkids have seen them do it, but they've never really sat down and explained why. Why charity A instead of charity B? You know, what drew them to that charity in the first place? You know, what's the why behind a lot of that can help reinforce some of those decisions? You know, how can they go ahead and meet a need? Just like you were talking at the beginning of the program with your client. You know, he obviously saw a need for training, for being able to have a better workforce, to meet the needs of his company. You know, how do they want to be perceived? Some of it may be the grand glory of a name on a building. Some may just want the satisfaction of knowing that they're moving the needle in some way, shape, or form with an issue going on. There's a lot of really great questions out there to get the conversation started. And I don't know if it's really as important as what questions they ask as much as the fact that they're asking questions. Wouldn't you agree, Randy?
It pretty much, unless you are being insulting in what you're asking, just bringing the subject up and gaining the confidence and the comfort to be able to ask those questions is half the battle.
Yeah.
You don't need to know all the answers. You don't need to know how all the solutions work, but you do need to understand how to get your client to open up to you about the things that are important to them, so you know where to go next.
And not just what's worked, but what hasn't worked. Right. I think a pivotal one that I've liked a lot is, where are the times that they've given where they've been frustrated? What was the thing that frustrated them about that experience? How are the ways that they can really improve the effectiveness and the efficiency of the different things they're doing? I can't tell you how many financial advisors that I know that when they talk to their clients about giving appreciated securities instead of giving cash, their clients are hearing that for the first time. I mean, it's one of the simplest things in the world, but nobody is talking about it. What are the ways that they can, and a business owner will get it. How can you increase effectiveness and efficiency? They're looking to do that every day in their business. So why not, in this aspect as well? So.
Great. I do have a question directed to Randy, although of course both of you can comment. Randy, when you had referenced an outfit that takes in-kind charitable gifts and turns them into cash, ultimately directing that to the charity, could you give an example of that?
Well, there are something like 80 or 90% of the charities in the United States won't accept gifts of real estate. They just won't take them. They're not equipped to take them. They don't know how to. They don't have the first clue about what happens if someone wants to give me something that's, even if it's down the block, if it's not in my state, if it's a piece of real estate in some place I'm not aware of. How do we assess whether or not what it's worth? All those things. How do we maintain it? How do we do all those things? So there are a couple of charities that serve as receptors. They'll take the real estate in. They will either hold it or liquidate it, and they will proceed to transfer the cash to the other charity, the end charity where the donor was originally trying to give. And they have to take a little bit for shipping and handling, but it's, again, if the charity isn't going to take the real estate, they're not going to get the gift. And I can tell you, I've seen this happen a number of times, where the charity is kind of hesitating and the donor just goes someplace else. Because the donor doesn't want resistance. So, before you say no, you have to say, yeah, well, give me a day and I'm going to get you an answer. And then you have to go get the answer. And so there are those facilitating charities.
And some of it can be as simple as community foundations in some instances,
Yeah.
depending on the geographic. Community foundations sometimes are more apt to have those resources where they can serve as a charitable middleman. Donor advised funds, if the end goal for the client is a donor advised fund, then there's a number of programs, including AEF and including, other national programs that have that type of bandwidth to be able to do something like that. So I think it really kind of depends on where they want their final recipient to be. If the idea is that they want those proceeds to go specifically to a single issue charity of choice, their place of worship, their college, cancer, or whatever the case may be, then those intermediaries or their community foundation may be a great fit. If there's the need for them to create a donor advised fund, then there's definitely a myriad of national programs or community foundation programs that could meet that need.
And it also depends a little bit on what the asset is. Somebody wanted. I do a lot of work with collectors, right? So somebody wanted a collector card to be sold, and we found a way to do that. But it didn't happen just because I was sitting there. It happened because I had the resources to be able to go find the right place.
So we've heard, obviously, so much today couple of my brief takeaways, and then of course I want the reflections from the both of you. But the business marketplace and the business owners really are looking for guidance based on their age, where their wealth resides, oftentimes the majority of it in their business. And in real estate, it does add complexity, however, also adds opportunity. And to be able to harmonize the business and the family, legacy, philanthropy, impact, does take collaboration. It takes experience. However, from what I'm hearing, it's more encouragement than discouragement. Very energized by the opportunity going forward again in this space. And I would ask that both of you provide a brief recap as well.
I think you said it all, Rob. I look at the world of financial advice, and I don't know why advisors don't incorporate the philanthropic discussion with all of their clients. I just think it changes how they perceive you as an advisor, and it changes the outcomes of all planning. And I think it's really important work, and advisors really need to understand that this can make a complete difference, not only in the lives of their clients, but in their own lives and in the life of their community. It's just very important that more people understand this.
I can't agree more. If I could add to that, I think, there can be a lot to take in. As Randy indicated, the number of years he's been doing it, the number of years I've been doing it, you just don't wake up one morning and know all this stuff. But it's in it, but I don't think that's any different for anything else that a financial advisor specializes in. If they're specializing in retirement plans, I think there's a learning curve there too. If they're going to specialize in other avenues, there's a learning curve there too. But, I think there's so many advisors that I know that when they latch onto this, the benefit that they feel, not just in the business, but personally from that experience, is really significantly game-changing for them, life-changing for them in what they're able to do and how they're able to create value, give value, and receive value out of that whole experience. And I think that is really one of the biggest things that, I don't think we can drive home enough. And, it is fun. It is fun to see the things that these folks come up with the things that they can brainstorm, with the things that they want to accomplish. It's just fun. And I like Randy said, I wish more folks would embrace that and really grab hold of looking at this as an opportunity rather than a way that, rather than looking at it as a negative. And I think, while we focused on business owners, I think the one parting thought I would say to that is don't discount this with, we talked a lot about boomer business owners, but don't discount this with your younger business owners. We've seen a lot of business owners come to us that are in their 40s and 50s that still have young kids, that have a lot of concerns about how that sudden wealth of the influx of cash from the sale of that business is going to impact their family as they're still trying to raise and create responsible human beings. So, that's just another avenue that I would say, not to sell short in this. So thank you.
I would like to add a challenge. And you cannot do this for the wrong reasons. You must do this because you want to do this. But I would challenge everyone out there who is not volunteering someplace to sit down and think about what you care about, and then go find a place to volunteer. You can't do this to go get clients. You have to do it just because this is something you care about. And go volunteer for 30 days or 60 days and 90 days. And see if this does not have a profound impact on the way you look at things, the way you act in your business, and the way you talk to your clients. I think that would be, if you walk away with nothing else, go do that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for your attendance at today's VTC, and thanks so much to our panelists, Laura Malone, Randy Fox, for your expert guidance on this very complex topic. FSP would again like to thank the American Cancer Society for their sponsorship of today's VTC. Please make sure to return your individual attendance record and course evaluation to your chapter site monitor. Have a great day.